If someone asked me what I regret most in life, I would definitely say, believing that blood ties can heal every crack in a person's heart. I was wrong, and the price I paid almost turned me into the destroyer of my own family. I didn't know when I raised that glass of red wine shimmering under the lights, that I held a secret powerful enough to change my sister's fate forever. Sometimes, the one who seems the weakest can become the nightmare of the person who underestimated them. This is the story of me, Emily Wilson, 27 years old, and the perfect older sister who only exists in a portrait on the wall. I'm Emily Wilson, born and raised in the suburbs of Connecticut. My family is fairly well off. My parents run an old family-owned wine shop chain, reputable enough that everyone thinks we're the model family. My sister, Olivia Wilson Harris, is 8 years older than me and has been my parents' endless pride since high school. She won a scholarship to Harvard, married Matthew Harris, a successful real estate businessman, and built a luxurious home in the suburbs of New Haven. And me, I have nothing to brag about. After graduating with a journalism degree from a mediocre college, I became a freelance editor, preferring to write rather than attend fancy high society parties. Olivia always belittled me, subtly comparing me to her friends, and never hesitated to lecture me in front of others. My parents were different. They loved me but were always exhausted from Olivia's complaints about me. Things like, Emily is immature, Emily just freeloads, Emily needs to behave like a true Wilson woman. Sometimes I wondered if my disappearance would make her feel more at ease. For years I avoided family gatherings just to escape sitting silently while Olivia bragged about her $1.2 million house, her brand new SUV, or her lavish Maldives trips with Matthew. But last month my mom suddenly called me, her voice choked up. She said my dad's health had declined and asked if my sister and I could both come home to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary together. I couldn't say no to her. I told myself, just a few hours, then I'll go back to my peaceful world. I agreed, even though I had a strange feeling, like this trip would reveal something I wasn't ready for. That evening I drove to Olivia's mansion. Her house exuded a cold luxury, a black wrought iron gate, a gravel-covered front yard, warm yellow lights along a stone walkway. It wasn't Olivia who opened the door, but a Hispanic butler named Marco, someone I'd never met before. Marco bowed politely, took my bag, and led me into a living room as big as a hotel lobby. I saw Matthew before I saw Olivia. He was on the balcony making a hurried phone call, looking tense. When he saw me, he quickly hung up and switched to his usual charming smile. He shook my hand and called me his baby sister, which made my skin crawl. A few minutes later, Olivia finally came down the spiral wooden stairs, wearing a tight white silk dress, her blonde hair curled like a movie star. She hugged me tightly, her lips smiling but her eyes icy cold. In that moment, I knew I was just a prop for my parents' anniversary party, and Olivia would do whatever it took to keep everything under her control. She led me to the backyard where a buffet was set up. They'd hired a jazz band, put up dome tents strung with fairy lights, and the clinking of glasses mixed with the laughter of Olivia's wealthy friends. I poured myself a glass of red wine and stood close to the buffet table, trying to stay invisible and keep things calm. But then, in what seemed like a safe moment, I accidentally saw Olivia whisper something to Marco and point at me. Her eyes flicked to the glass in my hand, then she quickly looked away, as if nothing had happened. I tightened my grip on the wine glass. A chilling thought flashed through my mind. Olivia, what are you planning for me this time? And I had no idea. My next move would cost her everything she'd ever been so proud of. I still stood by the buffet table, gripping my wine glass like an invisible shield between me and Olivia's pretentious world. No one paid attention to me, or maybe they saw my presence as nothing more than a decorative plant, just there to complete the image of a happy family. The jazz music drifted on. Groups of guests murmured about real estate, investment projects, and expensive vacations. A few of them had seen me at previous parties. They nodded politely, but no one bothered to chat for long. Everyone surrounded Olivia and Matthew, the golden couple of the Wilson family. I glanced at Olivia from afar. She held a glass of champagne, sweetly chatting with her rich friends. Whenever someone complimented her youthful looks, she would tilt her head, pretending to be modest. I used to admire that glamorous aura when I was a kid, but the older I got, the more I understood. To maintain her perfect image, Olivia was willing to step on anyone, even her own family. Matthew stood next to his wife, his hand lightly resting on Olivia's waist like a mark of ownership. Occasionally, his eyes flicked toward me, a brief look of curiosity before turning away. I knew I had never been a threat to them, at least not until tonight. A shrill laugh from Olivia snapped me back to reality. She was bragging to everyone about next year's Europe trip, the expensive gifts Matthew had bought her. I heard Olivia's voice loud and clear. I always tell Emily to work harder so she can find a successful man like Matthew. But she just loves wandering around writing articles, living in her little dream world. A few guests burst out laughing. I pressed my lips together, took a deep breath, and reminded myself, just ignore it, a few more hours and I'll be out of this place. Suddenly I saw Marco, the butler, carrying a small tray, gliding past me and stopping right at the wine table. He grabbed a new bottle and topped off my glass until it nearly overflowed. He didn't look at me, just gave a slight nod before stepping back, his eyes flicking toward Olivia as if waiting for her signal. My gut told me something was very wrong. Olivia turned to look at me, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. I didn't drink right away. Instead, I moved to the edge of the garden, where the lights were dimmer and the music was muffled by the wind. I watched my sister from afar. Every move, every glance of hers was calculated to perfection. I almost laughed. Someone who once succeeded with her brains and beauty now resorted to cheap tricks. For what? To humiliate me in front of everyone. Or was it something worse? The party reached its peak when my parents appeared. My father, Jonathan Wilson, looking thinner than the last time I saw him, stood in the middle of the yard, raising his glass for a toast. My mother, Helen, held his arm, nodding tearfully as he spoke of 30 years of love, patience, and devotion. Everyone applauded enthusiastically. Matthew put his arm around Olivia and gave her a kiss in front of the crowd. Just like an American family movie I utterly despised. Beautiful but fake. I took a deep breath, deciding to return to the wine table to set my glass down. I didn't want another sip. But as I passed the flower bed, I suddenly heard Olivia whispering to Marco, her voice no longer sweet. Remember, as long as she finishes that glass, I'll handle the rest. Marco nodded, his eyes showing a hint of pity when he caught me standing right there. I pretended not to hear a thing, kept walking to the wine table. I saw my glass still there, filled to the brim, and right next to it was Matthew's glass, also red wine but half full. Everything twisted in my head. I didn't know what Olivia had put in there, but I was certain it wasn't harmless. A chill ran down my spine. I looked around. Everyone was laughing and talking, completely unaware. In that split second, I thought of my parents, already worn out by the tension between me and my sister. I thought of myself, the little sister who'd spent her whole life being looked down on. And I thought of Olivia, who always believed she was 1,000 times smarter than me. I grabbed my glass, turned, and swapped it with Matthew's before he could notice. I moved so fast my heart pounded like a drum. Then I stepped back, standing by the wall, watching Matthew return, pick up the switched glass, and down it in 3 gulps. Olivia saw it happen. Her eyes flicked from me to her husband, then back to me. Her mouth half open as if to say something, but she swallowed it back. I gave her a faint smile, nodded politely, and slipped into a darker corner to avoid any eyes on me. Amid the soft saxophone, I saw Olivia pull out her phone, her face draining of color as Matthew called for another drink, absent-mindedly wrapping his arm around her waist, mumbling something only she could hear. Right then, I knew everything was about to blow up. And this time, the one humiliated in front of the whole family would not be me anymore. I stood hidden behind the row of stone columns leading to the garden behind Olivia's house. From here, I could clearly see everything happening among the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. My hand still trembled slightly, but inside I felt a strange, terrifying calm. Matthew, the man considered the ideal husband, was standing among his businessman friends, laughing louder than usual. The wine glass, the one Olivia had planned for me to drink, had now gone down his throat. I wondered, what had she put in it? A sedative, something to make me lose control, or something strong enough to humiliate me in front of the whole family? The sharp click of Olivia's high heels echoed quickly along the stone path. She hurried over to her husband, grabbing Matthew's arm, pulling him to the edge of the garden as if trying to avoid everyone's eyes. I leaned in, holding my breath to hear better. "Matthew, are you okay?" Olivia's voice was low but urgent, completely different from her usual pretentious tone. Matthew shook his head, his eyes dazed like he was drunk, but clearly he'd only had a few glasses, nowhere near enough to be this wasted. He let out a goofy laugh, leaning close to Olivia's face. "Olivia, you know what?" Matthew slurred, his words sticking to his tongue. "You always think you're the smartest. But, ha. I saw Olivia's hand clench hard on his shoulder, her nails digging into the expensive suit fabric. Her eyes darted around, panic barely hidden behind a forced smile. "Matthew, shut up. Go to the room and rest. Listen to me." But Matthew wouldn't listen. He staggered away from her grip, heading back to the middle of the yard, where the jazz music suddenly stopped because the band too had noticed an unusual guest stealing the spotlight. "You all know what?" Matthew raised his empty wine glass high, his voice booming. I'm the one who's had to endure this witch of a wife for 7 years." The crowd fell silent. My parents turned to each other, my mother's face drained of color, my father frowned, about to step in but too late. "You think Olivia's so saintly?" Matthew sneered at the wealthy friends. "She and I are the perfect couple, all right. Perfect at lying, perfect at funneling the Wilson family's money into her secret stash." A chill shot through my whole body. I had never thought Olivia could sink this low. Or rather, I had never seen the true face of her marriage until now. Olivia lunged forward, grabbing Matthew's arm, trying to drag him back inside. Her voice trembled, half growling. "Shut up, Matthew. You're drunk." "I'm so sorry, everyone, he just had a bit too much." But Matthew shoved her off, his eyes wild like a cornered animal. He roared, "Drunk? I'm more sober than ever. Tonight I'm saying it all, right in front of Daddy-in-law, in front of dear Emily who loves trailing her perfect brother-in-law." Piercing look shot straight at me. I stood still, didn't back away, didn't flinch. What I wanted to know was being laid bare right here. My father pushed through the crowd, placing a heavy, disappointed hand on Matthew's shoulder. "Matthew, you should stop now. We can talk about this later." Matthew brushed him off with a mocking laugh. "Old man, you think you're so smart, huh? You let Olivia control everything. This Emily girl, you all think she's useless, weak. Ha ha. Olivia's afraid of her. Afraid she'll dig up the books I hid." I felt Olivia's eyes slash over me like a sharp, cold knife. She must have wondered when I'd learned this secret, or maybe she was wondering, how long had I planned this? Some guests began slipping away from the party, a few secretly pulling out their phones to record video. A family celebration had turned into a stage stripping bare every filthy thing Olivia had hidden for years. Matthew staggered, still rambling about faked invoices, embezzled project funds. He tried to grab Olivia again, shouting, "What else were you planning to slip in my drink, Olivia? Gonna turn me into your puppet again?" Whispers, scoffs, the butler's frantic apologies to guests. Everything tangled in my head like chaotic noise. In the moment Olivia turned to look at me, her lips silently mouthed 2 words. "You know everything, don't you, Emily?" I stayed silent. I didn't need to answer. The one speaking for me was Matthew, her perfect husband, now collapsing onto the grass amid the crowd's murmur, yellow lights casting a cold glow over his pale face as the drug coursed too deep. I don't remember when I stepped out of the shadows. I just know that when the crowd gathered around Matthew, I was standing right behind Olivia. She stood frozen like a statue, eyes wide open staring at her unconscious husband, her mouth moving soundlessly with meaningless words. Matthew lay flat on the grass, his tie crooked, a red stain on his shirt collar as evidence of the frenzy just moments ago. A server hurried off to call an ambulance. The murmur of whispers, the clicks of phones taking photos and recording videos buzzed like a swarm of bees gone wild. My father turned to Olivia, his voice low but cold. "Olivia, how do you plan to explain this?" Olivia jolted as if waking from a nightmare. She turned toward my father, her lips trembling then closing again. For the first time in my life I saw Olivia, my proud sister who had never known fear, now bewildered like a child caught doing something wrong. I didn't say a word. I stood by the buffet table, gripping the wine glass that still held a few drops. That shimmering liquid had almost run through my veins, turning me into a babbling fool in front of the whole family, or worse. I didn't even dare finish that thought. The wail of an ambulance siren pierced the street out front. 2 paramedics pushed through the guests, checked on Matthew, then quickly lifted him onto a stretcher. He was still groaning, eyes half closed, mumbling something incoherent. "I'm going with him." Olivia nearly screamed when a paramedic stopped her from climbing into the ambulance. But my father stopped her hand, his voice hoarse but firm. "No, stay here. Matthew doesn't need you right now. This family needs you to answer first." After that he looked at me. There was something strange in his eyes, pain, doubt, and trust. I understood in that moment that everyone realized I was no longer the naive little sister who let my big sister manipulate me. My mother stepped closer, pulled me into a tight hug. She trembled as she asked me in a near whisper, "Emily, how long have you known about this?" I looked at Olivia. She avoided my gaze, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles whitened. I took a deep breath. "I don't know everything, Mom. I only knew that tonight she planned to humiliate me in front of everyone." "Just switch the glasses." The words were light as air, but when they dropped into the quiet garden, they landed heavy as a hammer. A few lingering guests heard them and looked at Olivia with eyes that now saw her completely differently. My father gave a slight nod, his hand gripping my mother's shoulder as if to keep her from collapsing. He turned to Olivia, his voice icy. "What were you going to put in Emily's wine?" Olivia stayed silent. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then on the third she seemed to collapse. Her whole body trembled and she covered her face, sobbing. I just wanted to make her slip up. Embarrass her a little. I didn't think Matthew would drink it. I didn't think he would." My mother let go of me and stepped right up to Olivia. The slap she landed on Olivia's cheek echoed so loud the whole garden fell silent. "What have you turned this family into, Olivia?" My mother's voice broke. "You're her sister. You should protect her, teach her to live well, not harm her like an enemy." Olivia collapsed next to the buffet table. Her white dress was stained, her lipstick smeared, her hair a tangled mess. I had waited for this moment for so long, the moment my sister no longer stood so arrogantly before me. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was a bone-deep exhaustion. One of my father's business friends cleared his throat and spoke up. "Mr. Jonathan, if I may. Perhaps your family should handle this privately. We don't wish to interfere." My father nodded, thanking him. The guests quietly filed out, none of them daring to look at Olivia again. They were either scared, disgusted, or simply desperate to leave this scene that was about to turn into a family trial. Marco, the butler, lingered near the door. I gestured for him to come over. Marco bowed deeply to my parents, his voice hoarse with fear. "I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Harris forced me to do it. I'm just a servant, My father waved him off, signaling him to go. He didn't get angry, but his eyes looked more sunken than ever. My mother helped Olivia to her feet and guided her inside. I didn't know what she would say behind that closed door, whether she would forgive or not. I no longer cared. I stepped alone out the front gate, inhaling the cold night air deep into my lungs. In the distance, I could still see the ambulance lights flashing red on the empty street. Matthew was in there, the perfect husband, now a ticking bomb holding secrets enough to drag Olivia down into the mud with him. I pulled out my phone and dialed the lawyer I had secretly been contacting for weeks in case the worst happened. The man's calm voice cut through the night. "Emily, is it time to release the documents you asked me to keep?" I looked back at the mansion behind me, where yellow light still spilled from an upstairs window, where my sister was falling apart, and I stood here, free, no longer afraid. I smiled faintly and whispered into the phone. "Yes, it's time." I stood by the Wilson estate gate, my back lightly leaning against the cold stone pillar, phone in hand, my heart heavy as if weighed down by a boulder. In my head still echoed Olivia's ragged breathing, Matthew's drunken mumbling on the ambulance stretcher, my mother's choking sobs, all tangled up in a night that was supposed to be filled only with wine and well wishes. "Miss Emily, I've received the signal." Attorney McCarthy's steady voice came through the phone. "I will forward all copies of the ledgers and documents on Harris & Co.'s illegal expenses to Mr. Jonathan." "Are you sure?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them to look at the row of brightly lit mansions behind me. I remembered all the sleepless nights, secretly digging through Olivia's office files, the invoices matching the bank messages I hacked from Matthew's old phone. Everything linked together, clearer than any rumor I'd ever heard about my sister's perfect family. "I'm sure," I replied, my voice eerily calm. "Send all the originals to my father, and an extra copy to the Financial Investigation Unit. I want this buried for good." McCarthy clicked his tongue lightly, then reminded me. "Once this comes out, Harris & Co. will collapse. Olivia and Matthew may face trial. You understand that, right?" "I understand," I said softly but firmly. "Thank you." I hung up and slipped my phone into my coat pocket. The chirping of night insects along the white fence felt so much easier to breathe than the whispers and lies of that party just hours ago. For the first time in years, my shoulders felt light, like I'd finally cut off the invisible rope binding me under Olivia's shadow. The front door creaked open, pulling me from my thoughts. My father stood on the porch, looking around for me. When he spotted me under the old maple tree, he exhaled and slowly walked over. He didn't scold me, nor did he hug me like Mom always did. He just looked at me for a long moment, his aging eyes deep and searching, then asked quietly, "How long have you known about this?" I bit my lip and answered honestly. "About 4 months ago. Found some shady invoices. At first I just planned to talk to her privately. But when I asked, she brushed me off like trash. I knew she wouldn't stop, so I prepared." Dad nodded slowly. I saw his hand tremble slightly as he gripped the wooden railing. Even though he was a steel businessman, I knew his heart was still soft when facing cracks within his own bloodline. "Olivia, does she hate you that much, Emily?" he asked, his voice drifting like a sigh. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about my childhood. Olivia got the princess dresses, the piano lessons, the private rides. And me, the sister born 8 years later, I got all her hand-me-downs. She was smart, beautiful, a Harvard scholar. I was just a faint shadow. She resented even the small freedom I kept for myself, resented it so much she wanted to destroy it. Finally I sighed. "I think she doesn't just hate me, Dad. She hates anyone who doesn't live by the script she writes." Dad lifted his gaze to the night sky, his eyelids drooping. After a while, he placed his hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "No matter what, you did the right thing. I'm sorry I let you carry this burden alone." I smiled, though my eyes suddenly stung. I never wanted an apology. I just wanted, for once, to see Olivia no longer be an untouchable idol in our parents' eyes. The living room door opened again. My mother stepped out, her eyes swollen and red, pulling Olivia along. My sister's face pale, her dress wrinkled, her eyes stripped of all their usual pride. When she saw me, Olivia stopped walking, her lips pressed tight, her throat tightening as if she wanted to say something. But it all came out as a meaningless whisper. "Emily." I cut her off, calm as if closing an old book. "You don't need to apologize to me. From now on, let the law do its job." Olivia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as the weak little sister but as the person who quietly stripped away every mask she'd layered over the years. My father's phone rang. It was Attorney McCarthy calling to confirm. The files had been delivered to the Connecticut Financial Investigation Office, and a hard copy would be in my father's hands by tomorrow morning. My mother gently squeezed my hand, her voice tired but relieved. "Everything will be okay now, Emily." I wasn't sure if everything would be okay. Harris & Co. would crumble, Matthew might go to court, Olivia would certainly face an investigation. The Wilson family would be tabloid fodder for a long time. But I knew one thing. From today on, I was no longer just a shadow in someone else's story. I was myself, Emily Wilson, the one who dared to rip off this family's glamorous curtain, even knowing there would be no going back to the old quiet days. But I still smiled because to me, the truth was always worth more than any beautiful mask. 3 weeks after that disastrous anniversary night, Olivia's mansion now sat quiet like an abandoned castle. The ornate iron gate still stood, but no one came and went anymore. No butler, no more lavish parties under warm yet cold yellow lights. Matthew had been discharged from the hospital long ago, but he never returned here. The moment he regained consciousness, he signed a full confession admitting to embezzling Harris & Co.'s funds, detailing how Olivia colluded with him and ordered the cover-ups. In exchange, he got a lighter sentence and avoided having his own dirty side deals exposed. The news spread like an oil spill. Harris & Co. officially filed for bankruptcy. Investors rushed to sue and claim damages. Tabloids ran sensational headlines about the Wilson family, a once famous wine empire now turned into the center of a financial scandal. I didn't hide from the press. I stepped forward publicly, answered the necessary questions, told the truth, and owned up to staying silent for too long. Strangely, that earned me some public sympathy. They called me the one who broke the wall of silence. A title I didn't need, but at least it proved I was no longer just the invisible shadow behind my sister. And Olivia, after the shock of Matthew's betrayal, she was summoned for investigation for weeks. She stubbornly denied everything, but the evidence from Matthew, the ledgers I quietly gathered, and the suspicious expenses traced back to her side accounts were enough to crush any denial. On the day of the preliminary hearing, I sat in the very back row. Olivia sat at the defendant's table, her face pale, dark circles under her sleepless eyes. Her once glossy blonde hair was now dry and hastily tied back. She wore a gray suit, the same color she once mocked as too dull, unfit for a powerful woman's image. When her eyes scanned the audience, I knew she'd look for me first. And she did. Olivia's gaze froze when it landed on me. No more rage, no more defiance, no more pride. Just one thing left, regret. But regret now was far too late. I turned my head away so she wouldn't see my lips tremble. Felt no joy. Just relief, as if a massive stone had finally been lifted from my chest after years of crushing weight. When the court ruled Olivia would be detained for further investigation, a corner of the courtroom murmured. My mother sat beside me, clutching my hand like she feared I would collapse. I whispered softly, "I'm okay, Mom. I really am." The day Olivia was escorted into the prison van, she turned back to find me. In that split second, I knew she wanted to say something, to beg forgiveness or just to plead for one last sympathetic look. But I had already turned my back and walked away, leaving her no trace of my softness ever again. 2 weeks later, Harris & Co. officially shut down. The company's assets were liquidated to repay part of the debt to shareholders and defrauded investors. My father decided to withdraw from all business activities, handing over the family's wine store chain to a trusted manager. And me, I moved into a small apartment in Hartford where I could work freely, writing for financial magazines I liked. No more Olivia to stop me from airing family laundry in public. I could freely tell our family's story now, with nothing hidden. One autumn morning, I received a letter from Olivia sent from the detention center. It was handwritten, her penmanship still neat and elegant like when she was in high school. I opened it, read the first line. "Emily, I know I don't deserve to ask your forgiveness," then folded it back up and tucked it into a drawer, unread. Not because I hated her to the core, but because I simply didn't care anymore. Whether I forgave her or not no longer mattered. The past stayed behind me. I was strong enough now not to let it drag me down into its swamp again. One late afternoon, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset pour an orange glow over the small street. My phone rang. It was Mom, her voice lighter than it had been in years. My parents would soon sell the old house and move to live near me in Hartford. Mom said, "From now on, our family will only have what's right, Emily. Thank you for being stronger than anyone else in this family." I laughed, my eyes a little wet. I'd never thought I'd hear that from her. A part of me once wished Olivia would be the one to protect me, but in the end, I was the one who protected the family from her ruthless ambition. I put down the phone and poured myself a glass of red wine. I watched it shimmer under the sunset, whispering to myself like a promise. From now on, no one will ever slip anything filthy into my glass again. Not even you, Olivia. That winter came earlier than usual. The first snow blanketed the balcony of my small Hartford apartment, turning the wooden chairs into soft, icy white mounds. I made myself a cup of hot ginger tea, wrapped in a blanket by the window, watching the streets twinkle with Christmas lights. 3 months since the final trial. Harris & Co. now existed only as an old name on bankruptcy papers. Matthew was sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. Olivia got a heavier sentence, 6 years in prison and a 10-year ban from any financial activity after her release. On sentencing day, the press jostled to snap a photo of Olivia bowing her head, her messy blonde hair soaked under Connecticut's cold rain. I didn't go to court that day. I just looked at the photo in the morning paper and quietly folded it away. I knew she regretted it. I believed there was still a small part of her that cared for me, but I no longer needed it to prove my worth. My family had moved to a suburb near Hartford. Every morning, my father watered the plants and tended a small garden my mother planted by the porch. Sometimes, he'd drop by my place with a basket of warm apple pies, knocking on my door at dawn. I'd brew tea, and we'd sit across from each other without needing many words. My mother called me at least 3 times a day, sometimes just to ask, "What did you eat today, my little girl?" The wounds Olivia left on my parents still lingered, but I knew time would heal them if people were brave enough to face it. Kept writing. After everything, I returned to my old passion, articles and stories about the dark side of perfect families. I no longer hid my name. I signed it plainly. Emily Wilson. That way, I reminded myself, I had the courage to step out of the shadows, and I was the one writing my life story. One day at the end of the year, I received an envelope from the prison addressed from Olivia. Inside wasn't another apology letter like before, but just an old photo. The 2 of us as kids, me sitting on her lap, my hair in pigtails, grinning wide, and her looking down, face full of pride. On the back of the photo was a short, shaky line. "I forgot how much I used to love you. If I ever get another chance, I hope to return to that moment. Wishing you happiness. Olivia." I held that photo for a long time. Then I put it away in a locked drawer, not throwing it out but not displaying it either. The past was wrong, but I chose to keep the most beautiful part we once had, as a reminder. Sometimes the one who hurts you most once loved you most, and because of that you must learn to let go and keep living. That Christmas, snow piled thick outside my window. I sat at my desk, writing the final lines of the memoir I had long dreamed of finishing. No one is born to be a shadow. No one deserves to have poison slipped into their wineglass just because they're weak. And once you've found your voice, you should never let anyone take it away again. I typed the final period and saved the draft. Outside, the snow kept falling. But I knew that for me, this winter was no longer a cold ending. It was the beginning of a new life, warm and free. From Emily and Olivia's story, I understand that behind the seemingly warm walls of any family can hide secrets and ruthless ambitions. What matters is not maintaining a perfect facade forever, but having the courage to expose the truth, even if that truth costs us the people closest to us. Emily chose to stand up, protect herself and her family from manipulation, and in doing so, found freedom, peace, and the true value of bravery. Sometimes letting go is the only salvation. What do you think about Emily's choice and the price Olivia had to pay? Feel free to share your thoughts on this story. And don't forget to follow the channel for more touching and meaningful real-life family stories.